The summer of 2025, a season that began with the promise of warmth and abundance, but quickly descended into turmoil for one Spanish community, marked a turning point for Murcia, a region known for its agricultural richness and vibrant culture. But beneath the surface, tensions were simmering, waiting for a catalyst. As Torre Pacheco, a town nestled within Murcia, erupted in violent unrest, the peace of this community was shattered, replaced by scenes of chaos and confrontation. Once a quiet agricultural town, where life revolved around the rhythm of the seasons and the harvest of the land, its streets became a battleground for several nights, transforming familiar landscapes into zones of conflict and fear. The nights were long, filled with the sounds of sirens and shouting. The spark, a local crime, seemingly isolated at first, that spiraled into civil disturbance, fueled by underlying anxieties and frustrations within the community. What began as a localized incident quickly escalated beyond control, pitting residents against the migrant community, creating a deep rift within the social fabric of the town. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and trust eroded, especially those of Maghrebi origin, who found themselves unfairly targeted and blamed for the town's problems. The unrest exposed the fragility of multicultural coexistence. Misinformation and political opportunism fanned the flames of discord, exploiting existing vulnerabilities and prejudices. The digital world amplified the tensions on the ground, fueled the chaos, turning a local incident into a national crisis. The consequences were far-reaching and devastating. These events exposed deep fractures, revealing the fault lines that ran through Spanish society. The cracks were widening, threatening to destabilize the entire structure. In Spain's approach to immigration, highlighting the challenges of managing diverse populations and integrating newcomers into society. The existing policies were clearly inadequate. Integration, revealing the shortcomings in creating a truly inclusive and equitable society for all its residents. The dream of a harmonious multicultural society seemed distant, and economic dependency on migrant labor, forcing a critical examination of the region's reliance on a workforce that is often marginalized and exploited. The economic realities were intertwined with social inequalities. The violence in Torre Pacheco is a warning, a stark reminder of the potential consequences of ignoring underlying social and economic problems. It served as a wake-up call for the nation, of how quickly tensions can explode when left unaddressed and allowed to fester beneath the surface. The explosion was sudden, but the conditions had been brewing for a long time. It began with a single incident, a seemingly minor event that triggered a chain reaction of anger and resentment, amplified and distorted by social media and biased news coverage, further inflaming passions and spreading misinformation. The truth became a casualty of the conflict, leading to protests that devolved into riots, as peaceful demonstrations were hijacked by extremist elements and turned violent. The line between protest and riot became blurred. Nights of escalating violence gripped the town, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The darkness concealed the identities of the perpetrators, making it difficult to maintain order. Forced a heavy police response, as authorities struggled to regain control of the streets and restore order. The police presence was a symbol of both security and oppression. To restore a fragile peace, a peace that hung precariously in the balance, threatened by the deep-seated divisions within the community, the silence was uneasy, pregnant with the potential for renewed conflict. Local residents voiced frustration, expressing their anger and resentment towards the perceived failures of the local government and the influx of migrants. Their voices were filled with pain and desperation, over crime and neglect, citing the deterioration of their neighborhoods and the lack of opportunities for economic advancement. They felt abandoned and forgotten by the authorities. While the migrant community, vital to the region's economy, found themselves caught in the crossfire, their contributions often overlooked and their rights disregarded. They were essential to the region's prosperity, yet treated as outsiders, became scapegoats, unfairly blamed for the town's problems, and subjected to discrimination and violence. They were easy targets, vulnerable and marginalized. Security forces struggled to contain the violence, overwhelmed by the scale of the unrest and the intensity of the emotions involved. They were caught between maintaining order and protecting the rights of all citizens, facing criticism from all sides, accused of both excessive force and insufficient action. Their actions were scrutinized and judged by a divided public. The conflict extended online, spilling over into social media platforms where the battle for public opinion raged. The digital world became a battleground for hearts and minds, where competing narratives and misinformation spread rapidly, further polarizing the community and making it difficult to discern the truth. The echo chambers of social media amplified the divisions. Understanding Torre Pacheco requires a deeper dive into the complexities of the situation, moving beyond simplistic explanations and easy answers. Means looking beyond headlines and sensationalized media reports to uncover the underlying causes of the unrest. The truth lies buried beneath layers of misinformation and prejudice. To the region's economic and social realities, examining the factors that contributed to the growing tensions and the breakdown of social cohesion. The economic disparities and social inequalities played a significant role. The story is local, rooted in the specific circumstances of Torre Pacheco, but its implications are national, resonating across Spain and highlighting the challenges facing many communities in the 21st century. Touching on immigration, the far right, and the rise of extremist ideologies that exploit fear and division for political gain. The political landscape is becoming increasingly polarized. Social media's influence in shaping public opinion and spreading misinformation, further complicating efforts to address the underlying issues. The digital world has become a powerful force in shaping our reality, and the challenge of social cohesion in a world increasingly characterized by division and polarization. Building bridges and fostering understanding is more important than ever. Torre Pacheco's unrest serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of social harmony and the urgent need for dialogue and understanding. It is a microcosm of Spain's broader struggles, reflecting the challenges of immigration, economic inequality, and social division that are facing many nations around the world. The events here force a reckoning, demanding a critical examination of the policies and attitudes that have contributed to the current crisis. It's time for honest self-reflection, with the country's most sensitive debates, forcing a national conversation about immigration, integration, and the future of Spanish society. The future of Spain depends on its ability to address these challenges effectively. It all began with a brutal assault on July 4th. The summer heat seemed to amplify the shock and horror that rippled through the small town. The attack would become a turning point, exposing deep-seated tensions simmering beneath the surface of Torre Pacheco. An 81-year-old man, a long-time resident of the community, was viciously attacked and subsequently hospitalized. His injuries were severe, and his condition sparked immediate concern among his family and neighbors. The news quickly spread, painting a grim picture of vulnerability and violence. News of the crime spread rapidly, amplified by social media and local news outlets. The details, often incomplete and sometimes inaccurate, fueled a growing sense of unease. People shared articles, commented on posts, and whispered in hushed tones about the incident, stoking fear and outrage across Torre Pacheco. The initial shock soon morphed into anger, with residents demanding answers and justice. A sense of security, once taken for granted, was shattered, leaving many feeling vulnerable and exposed. Rumors quickly blamed young men of Maghrebi origin, fueled by pre-existing prejudices and anxieties about immigration. These whispers spread like wildfire, poisoning the atmosphere and creating a climate of suspicion and distrust, turning a robbery into a flashpoint for ethnic tension. What began as a criminal act was quickly transformed into a symbol of deeper societal divisions, highlighting the fragile relationship between different communities within Torre Pacheco. The narrative shifted, subtly at first, then with increasing force. The focus moved away from the individual crime and towards broader issues of immigration, integration, and cultural identity. This was no longer just a crime, a random act of violence. It was being interpreted as something far more significant, a symptom of a society struggling to cope with rapid change and increasing diversity. But an attack by outsiders. The us versus them mentality took hold, with some residents viewing the migrant community as a threat to their way of life and the safety of their town. Calls for protest flooded social media, organized through online groups and fueled by a sense of collective outrage. The digital space became a breeding ground for anger and resentment, with aggressive, xenophobic language hinting at more than peaceful demonstration. The online rhetoric grew increasingly hostile, with some individuals openly advocating for violence and discrimination. Authorities focused on the investigation, attempting to identify and apprehend the perpetrators of the assault. They were also monitoring the growing unrest, aware of the potential for further violence, but were unprepared for the speed and intensity of the backlash. The online mobilization translated into real-world action with alarming speed, catching law enforcement off guard. By Saturday, the town was on edge, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Residents felt a sense of foreboding, unsure of what the day would bring, anticipation and anger mounting like a storm gathering on the horizon. The atmosphere was thick with resentment and a desire for retribution. The assault became a symbol, a rallying cry for those who felt marginalized and ignored. It represented a breaking point, a moment when long-simmering frustrations finally boiled over. Proof for many that the town was unsafe, that their fears about crime and immigration were justified. The attack confirmed their worst suspicions and fueled their determination to take action, and the migrant community to blame. They were seen as the source of the town's problems, the scapegoat for all the anxieties and frustrations that had been building up over time. Outrage quickly escalated to action, as residents took to the streets to voice their anger and demand change. The protests grew larger and more intense with each passing hour. The stage was set for violence, the air thick with anticipation and the threat of confrontation. The line between peaceful protest and outright aggression was becoming increasingly blurred. Torre Pacheco was about to erupt, the fragile peace shattered by a wave of anger and resentment. The consequences would be far-reaching, leaving a lasting scar on the community. The protest on July 5th began as a seemingly localized demonstration. What started as a gathering of concerned citizens soon morphed into something far more volatile and dangerous. It unleashed chaos, a maelstrom of anger and frustration that quickly spiraled out of control. The initial grievances, whatever they may have been, were soon overshadowed by the raw, untamed energy of the mob. Hundreds gathered, their numbers swelling as the day progressed. People from all walks of life converged on the streets, drawn by a shared sense of discontent or perhaps simply by the allure of the spectacle. Anger boiling over, fueled by a potent mix of economic hardship, social tensions, and political polarization. The air crackled with animosity, a palpable sense that something was about to break. As radical elements incited the crowd, their voices amplified by the throng, their words like gasoline poured onto an already raging fire. These agitators, often operating from the fringes of society, seized the opportunity to exploit the existing unrest and push the situation towards violence. The demonstration devolved into a march, a surging mass of humanity snaking its way through the streets of Torre Pacheco. The initial purpose of the protest became increasingly blurred as the marchers moved with a singular, destructive intent. Targeting migrant neighborhoods and businesses, the march took on a sinister and discriminatory tone. Shops were vandalized, homes were threatened, and the sense of fear permeated the air. Dumpsters burned, their acrid smoke billowing into the sky, a visual representation of the chaos consuming the town. The flames danced menacingly, casting long shadows and reflecting in the eyes of the enraged crowd. Barricades rose, hastily constructed from whatever materials could be found, overturned bins, construction debris, even burning vehicles. These makeshift barriers transformed the streets into a battleground, dividing the town and its people, and the air filled with smoke, a choking, acrid haze that stung the eyes and burned the lungs. The smoke obscured the faces of the rioters, adding to the sense of anonymity and impunity. Local youths, some linked to far-right groups, emboldened by the anonymity of the crowd and the lack of immediate consequences, led the attacks. Their youthful energy channeled into acts of destruction and violence. Armed, masked, and intent on violence, they moved with a chilling efficiency, their actions fueled by hatred and a desire to inflict harm. Migrant residents, caught off guard, their homes and businesses under siege, fought back in desperate street clashes, defending their families and livelihoods against the onslaught. Police were overwhelmed, their numbers insufficient to contain the scale and intensity of the violence. Struggling to separate groups and protect property, they found themselves caught in the middle of a raging conflict. Reinforcements arrived, sirens wailing as they raced to the scene, a sign that the situation had reached a critical point. But riot police and rubber bullets, while intended to restore order, only escalated confrontations, further inflaming tensions and pushing the town closer to the brink. For several nights, the town was a war zone, a place of fear, violence, and uncertainty. Sirens and shouting echoed through the streets, a constant reminder of the chaos that had engulfed Torre Pacheco, and shattered glass haunting the streets, a testament to the destructive power of the mob. Families of all backgrounds hid indoors, terrified, their sense of security shattered by the events unfolding outside. The violence left scars, visible wounds on the landscape of the town, burned cars, their charred remains serving as grim reminders of the night's events, broken windows, gaping holes in the facades of shops and homes, and a shattered sense of community. The bonds that once held Torre Pacheco together now frayed and weakened. Torre Pacheco's peace was gone, replaced by a lingering sense of unease and a long road to recovery. Social media didn't just report the unrest, it fueled it. WhatsApp, Telegram, and Facebook became echo chambers for fear and misinformation. Far-right activists seized the moment, spreading old riot videos as if they were current, and sharing addresses of migrant homes. Racist memes and calls for vigilante justice went viral, drowning out moderate voices. Algorithms amplified the most extreme content, radicalizing locals and attracting outsiders. Law enforcement and journalists struggled to counter the digital onslaught. In Torre Pacheco, the battle for the narrative online was as fierce as the fight in the streets. As violence escalated, authorities scrambled to respond. The mayor condemned both the assault and the mob violence, urging calm and trust in the justice system. Regional and national officials deployed police reinforcements and promised zero tolerance for both crime and xenophobic riots. The message, the rule of law, applies to all. Yet restoring peace was slow and fraught. Residents accused authorities of inaction. Migrant advocates decried police heavy-handedness. The official response walked a tightrope, trying to quell violence without deepening divisions. Torre Pacheco's wounds would not heal easily. Torre Pacheco's identity is tied to agriculture and to immigration. The region's farms rely on migrant labor, especially from Morocco, Ecuador, and sub-Saharan Africa. Nearly a third of the town's population is foreign-born, creating a multicultural but often segregated community. Migrants face crowded housing, job insecurity, and social exclusion, despite powering the local economy. Tensions simmer over competition for resources and rapid cultural change. Political narratives exploit these anxieties, blaming migrants for crime and unemployment. The assault on the elderly man became a release valve for years of resentment. The violence targeted not just individuals, but the most visible symbol of change in the region. Torre Pacheco's unrest echoes past outbreaks of xenophobic violence in Spain's agricultural heartlands. The 2000 El Ejido riots set a grim precedent. A crime sparks collective punishment of migrants. Rapid economic growth, without social integration, leaves communities living parallel lives, ripe for conflict. The rise of the far right and economic hardship have strained Spain's integration model. National debates on immigration now filter down to local tragedies, turning personal crimes into catalysts for social conflict. Torre Pacheco is the latest chapter in a recurring story. The cycle of fear and violence continues. The violence triggered immediate political fallout. Vox framed the riots as a justified backlash against immigration, ignoring the racist attacks. The left condemned all violence, warning against hate speech and scapegoating migrants. The conservative regional government tried to balance calls for order with voter concerns about security. Civil society groups blamed all parties for neglecting integration and social investment. The unrest forced a national reckoning with Spain's failures on coexistence. Torre Pacheco became a flashpoint in the country's immigration debate. After the violence, restoring order was only the first step. Police arrested suspects from both the assault and the riots, signaling that justice would be impartial. Officials called for unity, stressing the economic and social necessity of coexistence. But trust was shattered. Migrants felt targeted, locals remained fearful. Healing will require more than speeches. Real investment in dialogue, social services, and integration. Torre Pacheco's ordeal is a warning for all of Spain. Social peace is fragile, and the dangers of misinformation and extremism are real. The future depends on choosing dialogue over division and coexistence over conflict.